It began on a typical Tuesday afternoon. David Hendricks, a 45-year-old marketing executive, was sitting in his lavish corner office on the top floor of a steel and glass tower that overlooked the city. The reflection of his own image in the window seemed to mirror his double life, a loving family man by day and a man enthralled by his secret love affair by night. His extramarital partner, a passionate and vibrant woman named Eliza, was hopelessly in love with him. She held on to the fantasy of them growing old together, her heart resonating with the promise of a love that David didn't feel. He was selfishly indulging himself, uncaring of the emotional turmoil he was causing in both women's lives. Then, the unthinkable happened. David arrived at Eliza's apartment one evening to find her lifeless body, a note expressing her anguish and despair at the realization that their future was nothing more than a mirage. David felt a sudden pang of guilt, but shrugged it off quickly, reminding himself that it was Eliza who had fostered those hopes, not him. But in the days that followed, an uncanny unease began to permeate the Hendricks household. David felt his secret eating away at him, gnawing his insides like a cancer. His relationship with his wife Anne became strained, and his interaction with his children grew distant. There were whispers in the corners, shadows that seemed more real than the house itself. One terrible night, during a tense argument between David and Anne, their youngest son Ethan, who had been playing nearby, tripped over a chair and fell awkwardly, his neck breaking with a sickening snap. The house plunged into an eerie silence, broken only by Anne's heart-wrenching screams. As they knelt by their lifeless son, a chill ran through the room, and a spectral form materialized before them. It was Eliza, her ethereal presence more harrowing than beautiful. She revealed her painful secret, confessing to causing Ethan's death as retribution for David's callous disregard for her feelings. "I just wanted you to feel the pain I felt when I found out about your real life. Your wife, your kids," she cried, her voice echoing with a sorrow that transcended the confines of their world. The room turned deathly cold as Anne turned towards David, her face twisted in a combination of grief, anger, and betrayal. "You did this! You killed our son!" she shrieked, her voice bouncing off the walls. The sound of their late son's laughter echoed hauntingly in the background, as if the house was crying out in agony. In a haze of guilt and despair, David felt a surge of adrenaline. His hand moved on its own, reaching for the gun he kept in the drawer for protection. He stared at his wife, his children's mother, the woman he'd betrayed, and Eliza, the woman he'd driven to her death. His heart pounded in his chest, the echo of their accusations filling his ears. His finger trembled on the trigger, tears blurring his vision. In the reflection of his wife's terrified eyes, he saw himself, not the successful executive or the unfaithful husband, but a monster who had brought about the ruin of his family. He pressed the trigger, the sound of the gunshot merging with his wife's screams and the spectral sobs of his dead lover. David slumped to the ground, his blood pooling around him, mirroring the darkness that had consumed his life. The echo of Anne's horrified screams filled the air, and the house seemed to tremble under the weight of its sorrow. Soon, the wailing sirens in the distance broke the dreadful silence. The police arrived to a horrifying scene. Anne, grief-stricken and trembling, kneeling beside David's lifeless body. Eliza had vanished, leaving behind the chilling air of vengeance and pain. The officers, hardened by years on the force, were taken aback by the intensity of the scene. Anne was beyond consolation, repeating her husband's name over and over again, as though trying to wake him from a terrible nightmare. But there would be no waking from this. Ethan's lifeless body was still there, a grim reminder of the calamity that had befallen the once happy family. As the officers scoured the scene, they came across a peculiar find, a framed photograph of David with a woman who wasn't his wife. The woman was radiant, her smile hinting at a deep affection for David. The realization hit them like a ton of bricks. This was Eliza, the woman whose ghost had visited this family's tragic end. Detective Laura Clark, who had been first on the scene, held up the photograph, studying it with a mix of sadness and anger. She glanced towards Anne, who seemed to be retreating further into herself with each passing moment. With a heavy sigh, Laura tucked the photograph into her evidence bag. There was a story here, a story of love, deceit, and tragedy. A story that now rested in the hands of the justice system, but even it seemed ill-equipped to address the horrors that had unfolded within these walls. As the night wore on, the once vibrant Hendricks house, now a crime scene, stood silent. The faint hum of the city was all that could be heard, as though life outside had remained untouched by the darkness that had consumed this home. When you subscribe, be sure to click the notification bell. Click here for more true scary stories.